May 8th, 1945. Victory in Europe Day. The Bavarian town of Kaufbach lay still, interrupted only by the groan of broken shutters and the low hum of American trucks rolling through deserted streets. Private Danny Kowalski descended into a cellar beneath a half-collapsed building, flashlight cutting through the pitch-black darkness. The stench hit him first. Human waste, mold, the sickly sweet odor of death too close to life. Then he saw them. 3 women and a grandmother, skeletal, trembling, trapped for 6 days without food. Danny had spent months convinced that every German was the enemy. His brother Michael had died at the Bulge just 3 months earlier. He expected to find monsters here, but when one of the women looked up at him, her hollow eyes filled with a desperation that spoke louder than any words, she whispered in broken English, "Bitte, die Kinder." Please the children. And something inside Danny broke. He crouched down, made eye contact, and uttered 4 words that would alter everything. "You're coming with me." The enemy wasn't supposed to look like this. But if you want to hear how one soldier's act of mercy shattered every rule and saved 3 generations, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I'd love seeing how these forgotten stories reach around the world. The war ended on a Tuesday. Private Danny Kowalski learned this from the shouts echoing through the convoy as their trucks rumbled into Kaufbach. Victory in Europe. Men cheered, passed around whiskey flasks, and slapped each other on the back as though they had personally defeated Hitler. Danny sat in the back of the truck, fingers clutching the dog tags in his pocket, the ones that didn't belong to him. Michael's tags. Michael's name etched into cold steel. Michael, who would never taste victory, who would never come home to Chicago where Ma lit candles every Sunday and pretended she still had 2 sons. The town unfolded before them like a nightmare. White sheets hung from broken windows. Makeshift surrender flags made of bed sheets, tablecloths, anything they could find. The buildings leaned at odd angles, facades crumbling, to reveal rooms frozen mid-collapse. A child's bed on the 3rd floor. A kitchen table set for a meal that would never be eaten. The streets were choked with rubble, drifts of grey like dirty snow. Most of the civilians had already fled. The smart ones. The ones who could still walk. Danny's unit set up camp in what had once been the town square. Lieutenant Brennan barked orders about securing perimeters and setting up supply lines, his Boston accent sharp and biting. The men moved with practiced efficiency, unloading crates and stringing communication wires. But their eyes kept drifting toward the shattered buildings, wondering who or what was still hiding in the shadows. Danny volunteered for the first patrol. Anything to move, to do something other than sit still with Michael's voice in his head. The air smelled of crushed stone and charred ruins. His boots crunched over debris, glass, brick, bits of things he didn't want to examine too closely. Somewhere a shutter banged in the wind, a lonely sound that made his shoulders tighten. 8 months in combat had taught him the difference between dangerous silence and emptiness. This was not empty. The sound came from beneath his feet, faint, barely audible, but he could feel it deep in his chest. A woman's voice, thin and desperate, shaped into words he couldn't understand, but knew in his bones meant a plea. Danny followed the sound to a collapsed apartment building, its front wall sheared away like a dollhouse. The entrance was blocked by rubble, but around the side he found a narrow gap, a cellar window, what was left of one. The crying was louder now. Multiple voices, one high and young, the other older, crackling with age. He should radio it in. That's what Brennan would say. Follow protocol. Don't enter unstable buildings alone. But Danny was already moving, squeezing through the gap, already descending into the damp, death-scented darkness. His flashlight beam cut through the blackness. The first thing he saw was standing water, maybe 4 inches deep, scummed with filth. Then movement. Shapes huddled against the far wall, pressing themselves into the stone. His light found their faces. 3 women, 1 ancient grandmother. Skeletal didn't begin to cover it. Their cheekbones jutted out like sharp knives. Their eyes were empty, hollow. Their hands, Jesus, their hands were just bones wrapped in paper-thin skin, raised in fear, as if expecting him to shoot them. The smell hit him then, overpowering. Human waste. mold thick enough to choke on, the sickly sweet scent of bodies devouring themselves from the inside out. His stomach turned. He'd seen death before, a lot of it. But this was different. This was slow. This was starvation measured in days, in hours, in the stretch of one shallow breath to the next. The youngest, maybe 14, made a sound like a trapped animal. The woman beside her pulled her close, even now, still protective. The third woman, the one in the middle, looked directly at Danny with eyes that had already accepted what was coming. She spoke. The words were German, melodic yet broken, shaped around consonants that reminded him of his grandmother's voice. Then she switched, fumbling for English that came out uneven but understandable. Bitte please die, Kinder, the children. Not just the children in front of him, but all children. Every mother's plea in any language, timeless and universal. Danny should leave. He should report this, let the officers figure out what to do with enemy civilians found in occupied territory. He had orders, no fraternization, no aid to German nationals unless officially sanctioned. These were the people who'd killed Michael. These were the enemy. But they weren't. They were just 3 women and a grandmother trapped in a cellar. He counted the signs, the desperation, the near-death stillness of the old woman. 6 days, maybe more, trapped after the building collapsed and sealed them in. No food, no water, only darkness, and the certainty that no one was coming. Michael's voice echoed in his mind, not from the dog tags, but from the last letter, the one Danny had memorized. Take care of people, Danny. That's what separates us from them. That's what we're fighting for. Not revenge, the chance to be better. Danny crouched down, met the middle woman's eyes, the one who'd spoken, the one who had once been a teacher before the world fell apart. Her gaze was steady, resigned, already dead inside, waiting for her body to follow. "You're coming with me," he said. For a moment nothing happened. Then something flickered in her expression. Not hope, that was too dangerous, too sharp, but the smallest ember of possibility. He reached for her hand. Her skin was ice cold. Her fingers trembled in his grip. "Can you stand?" he asked. She nodded, tried, failed. Her legs wouldn't hold her. Danny didn't think. He moved, swept the grandmother up first. She weighed nothing, just bird bones and loose skin. He carried her up the stairs into daylight that made her moan and turn her face away. Then back for the girl, who flinched but was too weak to resist. Then the other woman. Then finally the one who'd spoken. The one whose hand trembled in his as he helped her climb the stairs she'd probably thought she would die at the bottom of. Outside, in the pale May sunlight, they looked even worse. Like photos from the camps the army had liberated, the ones that made grown men vomit. Like proof of what happens when the world stops caring if people live or die. Danny keyed his radio. "Kowalski to base. Need medical at my location. 4 civilians. Severe malnutrition. Possible exposure. Send Captain Morris if she's available." Lieutenant Brennan's voice crackled back. "Status of civilians?" Danny looked at the grandmother, her chest barely rising, at the girl crying silently, at the teacher woman, watching him like she couldn't quite believe any of this was real. "Alive," he said. "They're alive. For now, that would have to be enough." Captain Ellen Morris arrived in under 10 minutes. Medic kit open, blonde hair scraped back under her cap. She took one look at the Schmidt women, and her jaw tightened in that way Danny knew meant she was forcing herself not to feel. Too much, too fast. "Jesus, Mary, and Joseph," she muttered, dropping to her knees beside the grandmother. Her fingers found a pulse point, counting silently. "How long were they down there?" 6 days, maybe more," Danny said. "Building collapsed. Sealed the entrance." Ellen's hands moved with practice. Efficiency. Checking pupils, palpating for dehydration, listening to breathing that rattled like dry leaves. She worked in silence for a full minute before looking up at Danny with eyes that had seen too many boys die on tables she couldn't save. "Get them to the medical tent slowly. No sudden movements. Their systems are shutting down." She turned to the middle woman, the one who spoke English. "Can you understand me?" "Yes." The word came out barely a whisper. "I teach. I taught English before." "Good. You're going to be okay, all of you. But you need to trust me. Can you do that?" The woman nodded, and then impossibly she smiled. Just a ghost of one, cracked lips pulling over damaged teeth. We have practiced trusting. Ellen blinked hard, cleared her throat and started issuing orders to the medics who had followed her. Within minutes, the Schmidt women were being carried on stretchers toward the medical station, a cluster of tents set up in what used to be the town square. Danny walked alongside, still carrying the grandmother because she wouldn't let go of his hand. They got water first, not much. Ellen was firm about that, explaining something about refeeding syndrome that Danny didn't fully understand, but trusted completely. Then broth thin as dishwater, but warm. The girl, Lisa, he'd learned, drank hers in careful sips, eyes darting between Danny and the tent entrance, like she expected stormtroopers to burst through any second. The grandmother drank half a cup and fell asleep mid-swallow. "She'll need constant monitoring," Ellen said quietly, adjusting the blankets around the old woman's shoulders. Her heart could give out any time. The body can only take so much. Danny nodded, watching the steady rise and fall of her breath, wondering if it would stop at any moment. He thought about Michael, about how there had been no chance to say goodbye, no final vigil, just a telegram and a box of personal effects that arrived 3 weeks after the funeral. He was still standing there, watching when Lieutenant Brennan found him at dawn. The lieutenant looked like he hadn't slept. His uniform was wrinkled, eyes bloodshot. When he saw the Schmidt women lying under army blankets in the medical tent, his face went carefully blank, the kind of dangerous calm that only came after too many hard decisions. "Private Kowalski outside, now!" The dressing down was quiet, precise. Brennan didn't yell, he never did, but his voice could strip flesh from bone when needed. Non-fraternization orders are clear. No aid to enemy civilians except through official channels. No personal involvement. No exceptions. Brennan's jaw tightened. "I've got displaced persons from 6 different countries who actually deserve our help. And you're using medical resources on Germans. They were dying." "Sir, a lot of people are dying, Private. That's war. The enemy doesn't get first-class treatment just because you feel sorry for them." Danny met his CO's eyes, seeing exhaustion, grief, the kind of weariness born of making impossible choices every day. "My brother died at the Bulge, sir. He died believing we were the good guys, that we were better than what we were fighting against." "Your brother," Brennan said slowly, "died following orders. Maybe you should try it sometime." "Yes, sir. They go back to the cellar today." "And you're on extended patrol for the next 72 hours. Dismissed." Danny saluted, turned to leave, but made it only 3 steps before Brennan spoke again. "Private." "Sir, I'm sorry about your brother." "I really am." Brennan's voice softened, losing its edge. "But sentiment gets soldiers killed." "Remember that," Danny wanted to argue. Wanted to tell him that Michael's letters were full of sentiment, full of instructions to treat prisoners with dignity, to remember the enemy's humanity. He wanted to say that maybe sentiment was the only thing keeping them human. Instead, he said, "Yes, sir," and walked back to the medical tent where the Schmidt women were waking to the crushing reality that their brief reprieve was over. Margaret, he had learned her name from Ellen, was already awake. She sat beside her mother-in-law's cot, holding the old woman's hand, and when she saw Danny's expression, she understood immediately. Her face didn't change. She'd had practice at this, Danny realized, practice at having hope snatched away. "We must go back," she said. "Not a question. I'm sorry." "No," she shook her head. "Do not apologize for kindness. We had one night of warmth, of safety. That is more than most receive." Lisa stirred under her blanket, blinking awake. When she saw her mother's expression, she started to cry. Not loud. German children had learned not to cry loudly during the war, but in silent sobs that made Danny's chest ache. He couldn't do it. Couldn't send them back to that cellar. He couldn't look at Lisa's tears, the grandmother's shallow breathing, and Margaret's awful resigned dignity, and just walk away because Lieutenant Brennan said so. Michael's voice again from the last letter, the hard right over the easy wrong. "Danny, that's what makes us different. Danny made a decision, one that would likely cost him his stripes, and possibly his freedom." "The building," he said slowly. "The one you were in. It's scheduled for army use, overflow storage, which means it needs to be secured before official processing." He looked at Margaret. That could take 48 hours, maybe more. Her eyes widened. Understanding blossomed slowly, carefully, as if afraid to believe it. During that time, Danny continued, someone would need to be there to make sure it's safe, to prevent looting. He paused. That someone could be you. You would do this. Margaret's English fractured with emotion. You would risk. I'm not risking anything. I'm securing a building for army use, that's all. He met her gaze. Can you work? Translate. Help with other civilians who might come looking for aid? Yes, of course, anything. Then it's not charity, it's employment. Which means you get rations. Danny was making this up as he went, stitching together half-truths and loopholes into something that might last long enough to matter. Captain Morris needs translators. German civilians keep showing up needing help. You could... Yes, Margaret said, cutting him off. Then again, more firmly. Yes, I will do this. Thank you. Thank you. She reached for his hand, squeezed it with fingers that had no strength left, but somehow conveyed everything in that simple gesture. Danny found Ellen Morris 20 minutes later, inventorying supplies, counting morphine ampules with the grim focus of someone who knew they would never have enough. I need a favor, he said. Ellen didn't look up. If this is about the German women, Brennan already chewed my head off for wasting resources. It's about needing a translator. Someone who speaks both German and English. Someone who can help when civilians come here. Ellen looked up, studied his face, and a small smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. That would be helpful. Officially helpful. The kind of helpful that comes with rations and legitimate army business. That's what I thought. Your CO is going to have your hide, probably. Ellen set her clipboard down, crossing her arms. I lost my brother at Normandy. Did you know that? Danny shook his head. He was 23, a medic. Died trying to save a German kid who couldn't have been more than 16. He'd been drafted 6 weeks earlier. Didn't even know how to hold his rifle right. Her voice stayed calm, professional, but her eyes glistened. My brother could have let that kid bleed out. No one would have questioned it, but he didn't. Because he knew that the soldier lying in front of him wasn't just the enemy. He was a kid who could have been any one of us. She said the war didn't give us permission to stop being human. She picked up her clipboard again, making a note. Tell Frau Schmidt to report here at 800 tomorrow. We'll make it official. Danny exhaled, feeling as though he'd been holding his breath for hours. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Private. Ellen's voice was calm but firm. If this blows up, we're both going down for it. But she was smiling when she said it. The kind of smile that told Danny she had already decided some rules were worth breaking. 2 weeks changed everything and nothing. Margaret showed up at the medical tent every morning at 0700, hair braided with careful precision, wearing a dress donated by someone that hung on her frame like a tent. She translated for crying widows, shell-shocked children, and old men who had lost everything except their muscle memory of pride. Her English was better than she let on. Literary, almost formal, shaped by years of teaching Goethe and Shakespeare to Bavarian teenagers who'd rather be anywhere else. Danny watched her work and saw what she must have been before the war. Patient, precise. The kind of teacher who remembered every student's name and never raised her voice because she didn't need to. She caught him staring once, looked up from helping a wounded civilian and smiled, tentative, as though she was still learning if smiles were allowed. You have questions, Private Kowalski. He had 1,000, but the one that came out was, your husband. What was he like? The smile faded, but not in a bad way. More like she was reaching back through time to touch something both precious and painful. Kind, she said finally. He was kind. A pastor in a small village outside Munich. He believed God spoke through small mercies, not grand gestures. She returned to bandaging the civilian's arm. He would have liked you, I think. Danny didn't know what to do with that, so he did what he always did when emotions got too close. He changed the subject. Your English is really good. Better than good. I taught literature for 15 years. Ardy, Dickens, your Hemingway, she replied, her hands moving with practiced efficiency, wrapping gauze as though it was second nature. I loved the language, the sound of it, how it could be blunt as a hammer or delicate as lace. Why'd you stop teaching? Her hands stilled. When my husband was drafted in 1942, I needed to care for my daughters and mother-in-law. And later, she didn't finish. She didn't need to. Later meant when the bombs started falling, and the army needed every able-bodied person, and teaching English literature became a luxury Germany couldn't afford. That evening, Danny brought extra rations to the secured building where the Schmidt women had set up something resembling a home. It wasn't much. Bedrolls on the floor, a single kerosene lamp, water carried from the public pump, but it was theirs. Private safe. Lisa was teaching her grandmother English words, pointing at objects and saying them slowly. Chair, chair, window, window. Ma repeated them with a thick accent, but her eyes were bright. She had gained weight in 2 weeks. Not much, but enough that her face no longer looked like a skull. Enough that when she laughed at her own pronunciation, the sound didn't rattle like a warning of death. Private Kowalski, Lisa said, scrambling to her feet, suddenly formal. She still wasn't sure of him, still watched him with eyes that expected betrayal. Because that's what 14 years of Nazi propaganda had taught her. Americans were monsters who'd burn your cities, rape your women, and laugh while doing it. But Danny kept bringing food, kept asking about her day, kept treating her like she mattered. It was breaking something in her. Danny could see it happening in real time. I brought chocolate, he said, holding out a Hershey bar he'd traded 2 cigarettes for. For sharing, not just for you. Lisa took it as though it was made of gold, probably worth more than gold in occupied Germany. She looked at her mother for permission. Margaret nodded. What do you say? Thank you, Private Kowalski. Lisa's English was getting better, her words clearer with every passing day. You are very kind to us. Just Danny, he said, his voice softening. You can call me Danny. Danny, she repeated carefully, testing the shape of it. Then quieter. Why do you help us? We are the enemy. Margaret's head snapped up, but Lisa's words were already out there, hanging in the air. No, it's okay, Danny said, lowering himself to sit on the floor, cross-legged, eye level with the girl. This conversation was inevitable. Better to have it on his terms. You want to know the truth? Lisa nodded. I don't know if you're the enemy, he said. I know what I was told. That all Germans were evil. That you all chose this. That you all deserved what happened. He pulled Michael's dog tags from under his shirt, letting them catch the lamplight. My brother died fighting your army 3 months ago. Battle of the Bulge. He was 24. Lisa's eyes went wide. Margaret set down the water bucket she'd been carrying. I was so angry, Danny continued, his voice catching in his throat. So angry I couldn't think straight. Every German I saw, I wanted them to hurt the way I was hurting. Wanted them to pay for taking Michael from me. He looked at the dog tags in his hand, his brother's name stamped in steel. But then I found you 3 in that cellar. And you weren't monsters. You were just people who got caught in something bigger than any of us. My brothers died too, Lisa whispered. Karl and Friedrich, 17 and 18, drafted to the Eastern Front. We never heard from them again after Stalgrad. The silence that followed felt too heavy. The weight of all the brothers who wouldn't come home pressing down on the room. Margaret broke it, her voice rough. Show him, Lisa. The girl hesitated, then reached under her bedroll and pulled out a battered photograph. 3 young men in Wehrmacht uniforms. The middle one had Margaret's eyes. My husband Ernst, Margaret said, pointing. My brother Klaus and our village priest, Father Müller. 1943. Before Ernst was sent east, she touched Klaus's face. My brother was executed in 1944 for distributing anti-Nazi pamphlets about what was happening to Jewish families, about the camps. Danny took the photograph and studied the faces. They looked like kids, like the boys he'd grown up with in Chicago. Like Michael. I'm sorry, Margaret said. For your brother, for all the brothers, for what my country did, for what we... Her voice cracked. For what we allowed to happen. Did you allow it? Danny asked, not accusing, just genuinely asking. Could you have stopped it? I do not know, she replied. I taught my students to think critically, to question, to read banned books in secret. She laughed bitterly. Small rebellions, meaningless rebellions. My brother's rebellion got him killed and changed nothing. The camps kept running, the trains kept rolling. The war kept going. It wasn't meaningless, Danny said. Your brother died trying to save people. That matters, did it? Margaret asked, her voice soft. He is dead, and the people he tried to save are also dead. And the world is still broken. Danny thought about Michael's letters, about treating prisoners with dignity, about small mercies, and about how his brother had believed that even in hell, even in the middle of war, the choice to be kind still mattered. My brother wrote me something, Danny said, his voice barely above a whisper. He said the war wasn't won by who we killed, but by who we chose to save. By whether we stayed human when everything tried to turn us into monsters. Margaret's eyes filled with tears, and she pressed her hand to her mouth, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Lisa moved closer to Danny, not touching him yet, but closer than she had ever been before. Were we the bad ones? She asked, her voice quiet, carrying the question she'd been holding on to for weeks. Maybe longer. Danny looked at her, this 14-year-old girl who had been taught to hate and was now painfully learning to unlearn everything she'd been told. I think the world's more complicated than good people and bad people. I think there are people who do terrible things and people who try to stop them, and a whole lot of people in the middle who are just trying to survive. Which am I? You're a kid, Lisa. You're just a kid, and you deserve a chance to grow up and figure out who you want to be, not who they told you to be. She nodded slowly, and then did something that surprised him. She broke off a piece of the Hershey bar and handed it back to him. For your brother, she said quietly, so he knows you are still being kind, still choosing to be human. Danny's throat closed. He took the chocolate, holding it like a sacrament. That night, walking back to his bunk, he realized something had shifted. The Schmidt women weren't charity cases anymore. They weren't enemies, victims, or obligations. They were just people he knew, people whose stories had become tangled with his own, people he'd miss when he shipped home, if he shipped home, because Danny was starting to suspect that some part of him would always stay here, in this ruined Bavarian town, in the moment when an angry soldier chose mercy and a frightened girl offered chocolate to a ghost. June 15th arrived with sunshine that felt like a promise. Danny woke early, already planning. He had been squirreling away supplies for 2 weeks, a can of condensed milk from his rations, sugar packets from the mess tent, a lemon he'd traded his entire cigarette allotment for. Captain Morris had contributed real butter from an officer's care package, and Corporal Jenkins from Brooklyn had somehow procured actual flour. What's the occasion? Jenkins had asked, handing over the precious ingredients with a knowing grin. Kid's birthday, the German kid. Yeah, the German kid, Jenkins nodded slowly. My sister's 14. Can't imagine what she'd do if she spent her birthday starving in a cellar. He'd pressed a small tin into Danny's hand. Baking powder. You'd make a proper cake without it. Now, Danny stood in the makeshift kitchen Ellen had helped him commandeer, staring at ingredients he only half knew how to use. His mother had baked every Sunday back in Chicago. Pierogi, babka, and bread that made the whole house smell like heaven. He'd watched her enough times. How hard could it be? Very hard, as it turned out. The first attempt burned. The second collapsed in the middle. The third looked like something died and was improperly buried. Danny was elbow-deep in his 4th try when Ellen appeared in the doorway, took one look at the disaster zone, and burst out laughing. Private Kowalski, what in God's name are you doing? Baking. He gestured helplessly at the carnage. Trying to bake. Sweet Jesus, move over. She rolled up her sleeves, assessed the remaining ingredients, and got to work with the brisk efficiency of someone who'd spent childhood in a Philadelphia kitchen. My mother would rise from her grave if she knew I was using army supplies to bake a cake for a German civilian, but she'd also haunt me forever if I let a child spend her birthday without something sweet. They worked in companionable silence, Ellen's hands moving with the same precision she brought to surgery. Measure, mix, fold. The batter came together, smooth and golden. Into the makeshift oven it went, a converted ammunition crate someone had rigged with heating elements that probably violated 6 different regulations. Why are you helping? Danny asked while they waited. Really? Ellen wiped flour from her hands, staring at the oven like it held answers. My brother Tommy used to bake, loved it. Used to say that making something sweet in a world full of bitterness was an act of rebellion. She smiled, a sad, wistful smile. When he died at Normandy, I thought, what's the point? What's the point of sweetness when everything's so bitter? And now I think maybe he was right. Maybe the sweetness matters more because of the bitterness. Maybe that's the whole point. The cake came out perfect, golden brown, still warm, smelling like every good thing Danny remembered from before the war. Ellen produced candles from somewhere. Real birthday candles, pink and white, the kind that belonged to peacetime. Where did you? Don't ask questions you don't want answered. Private. They transported the cake like it was nitroglycerin. Danny carried it while Ellen ran interference, steering curious soldiers away with increasingly creative lies about medical supplies and classified materials. By the time they reached the secured building, Danny's arms were shaking. The Schmidt women were waiting outside in the afternoon sun. Ma sat in a chair someone had donated, her face turned toward the warmth like a flower. Margaret was mending a shirt with thread she'd pulled from somewhere. And Lisa was 15 today, 15 and alive, which was its own kind of miracle. "Happy birthday," Danny said, setting the cake down on an upturned crate. Lisa stared, mouth opening and closing, but no sound came out. "It is real," Margaret whispered, rising from her seat. "This is real cake, Ellen confirmed. "Baked this morning. Private Kowalski did most of the work. Well, some of the work. A portion of the work. I helped," Danny protested. "You made 3 sacrificial offerings to the baking gods before I intervened," Lisa laughed. The sound was bright and young, and so unexpected that everyone stopped to stare. She clapped her hand over her mouth, eyes wide, as if she'd forgotten she was allowed to laugh. "It's okay," Danny said softly. "You're allowed to be happy." "I haven't had birthday cake since I was 11, Lisa said. "Before the war, before everything." She looked at her mother. "Mama, is this real?" Margaret's eyes were wet. "Yes, Liebchen, it is real." They lit the candles, all 15 of them, pink and white and glowing in the June sunshine. Lisa closed her eyes, made a wish with an intensity that made Danny's chest hurt, and blew them out in one breath. The cake tasted like hope, like proof that good things could still exist in a broken world. They ate it slowly, savoring every crumb. Lisa cried quietly into her slice, because she'd thought she'd never taste sweetness again. Other soldiers drifted by, drawn by the sound of celebration. Corporal Jenkins brought his harmonica and played something soft and sweet. Chaplain Roberts appeared with a German prayer book and offered a blessing in halting German that made Margaret press both hands to her heart. Even Lieutenant Brennan stopped for a moment, standing at a distance, watching with an expression Danny couldn't quite read. As the sun began to set, Margaret pulled Danny aside. Her English was careful, chosen with precision. "You gave me back my daughter's childhood today, even if only for these hours, even if tomorrow brings new sorrows." She touched his arm, tentative. "How do I thank you for this?" "You don't have to." "No, listen," her voice was fierce now. "Before the war, I taught my students that small kindnesses were the foundation of civilization, that grand gestures meant nothing without daily mercy. Then the war came, and I thought I was wrong. I thought only power mattered, only survival." She gestured to where Lisa sat with Ma, both of them still smiling. "You taught me I was right the first time. Small kindnesses are everything. They are the only things that last." Danny thought about Michael, about his brother's letters full of small observations, sharing rations with a hungry POW, helping a French farmer fix his fence, teaching Italian children English words. Michael had understood something Danny was only beginning to grasp. That war was won with bullets, tanks and bombs, but peace was built with birthday cakes, shared chocolate, and choosing mercy when vengeance would be easier. "My brother would have liked you," Danny said. "He believed in this, in choosing to be kind even when the world gave you every reason not to be." "Then he was a wise man," Margaret said. "And the world is poorer for losing him." The celebration wound down as darkness fell. Soldiers drifted back to their duties. Ellen packed up the remaining supplies. Chaplain Roberts offered a final blessing. Danny prepared to leave, already thinking about tomorrow's patrol schedule, when Lieutenant Brennan finally approached. "Private Kowalski, a word. Here it comes," Danny thought. The reprimand, the official censure, maybe even a court-martial for fraternization. But Brennan's expression wasn't angry. It was something else, something complicated. "That was a good thing you did today, Private," the lieutenant said quietly. "A human thing." He paused. "We've got orders. Building demolition scheduled for June 20th, 48 hours from now. This whole block comes down for reconstruction and clearing." Danny's stomach dropped. "The Schmidt women will need to relocate to DP Camp 7, 30 miles north. Mandatory for all remaining civilians." Brennan's voice was flat, professional. "The grandmother won't survive the transport." The doctor was clear about that. "Sir, if we could just—" "There are no exceptions, Private. The orders came from division. The building comes down whether anyone's in it or not." Brennan looked toward where Margaret sat with her daughters, all of them still smiling, still tasting joy. "I'm sorry. I know what you did here mattered. But sometimes mattering isn't enough." His voice was firm, then quieter, unofficial commendation for doing the right thing when it cost something. "That doesn't go in your file, but it goes in here." He tapped his chest over his heart. "Your brother would be proud, Private. For what it's worth, so am I." 3 months later, September brought cool winds and orders to ship home. Danny's unit was finally rotating stateside after a year of occupation duty. He'd spent his last week saying goodbyes, packing up a year of war he'd carry forever. The Schmidt women had been relocated to proper civilian housing, a small intact apartment in the reconstructed zone. Margaret had steady work translating for the occupation government, enough to feed her daughter and herself. Lisa was back in school, learning mathematics, literature, and how to be young again. Danny visited them one final time before leaving. The apartment was modest but clean, windows letting in the afternoon light. Real furniture donated by the Red Cross. A small kitchen where Margaret was teaching Lisa to make bread. The smell alone was enough to break his heart. Eastern warmth and the promise of normal life resuming. "You are leaving," Margaret said. Not a question. She'd known it was coming. "Ship out in 3 days. We will miss you." Simple words, but weighted with everything they'd survived together. Lisa appeared from the bedroom, holding something wrapped in cloth. She pressed it into Danny's hands with ceremony. "So you remember us. So you remember that small kindnesses change big lives." He unwrapped it carefully. The carved wooden robin, wings spread in flight. The one Lisa's grandfather had made before the war, before everything. "I can't take this. It's yours." It is ours," Lisa corrected, her English nearly flawless now. "And now it is also yours. So when you are home in Chicago, you will remember that even in the darkest times, people chose mercy. People chose love." Danny's vision blurred. He pulled both women into an embrace that would have earned him a court-martial 3 months ago, but now felt like the most natural thing in the world. Margaret pressed a letter into his hands. "For your mother, so she knows what her son did here. So she knows Michael's sacrifice meant something, because you taught us that mercy is stronger than revenge." The truck ride to the transport depot was quiet. Danny held the wooden robin in one hand, the letter in the other. He thought about Michael, about birthday cakes and funerals, about choosing the hard right over the easy wrong. He thought about 3 women alive and rebuilding, because one soldier looked into a cellar and saw people instead of enemies. "Small kindnesses," Margaret had said. "Small kindnesses are everything." The truck pulled away. Through the rear window, Danny watched Kaufbach shrink into the distance. This town where he'd learned that the war wasn't won by who you killed, but by who you chose to save. That victory meant nothing without mercy. That sometimes the bravest thing a soldier could do was carry a dying grandmother to her own bed and stand guard while she passed in peace. Michael's dog tags rested against his chest, warm from his body heat. And in his pocket, wings spread in eternal flight. A wooden robin carried stories of unexpected mercy across an ocean, proof that even in hell, humanity could survive if someone was brave enough to choose.